Is there anything that you would want to either reiterate or speak on before we close? Is there anything that you feel that needs to be said?
I would say that just be open to this. Follow your heart is calling you home right now, right here, right now, in this moment. And if this has spoken to you in any way, shape, or form, or you can just sense there's something here that I haven't quite grasped yet, listen to what your heart has to say about it. Not your mind, not your head, but your heart. Because the heart will lead you home. Because the heart never lies. Never lies.
Hey, and thank you so much, Philip, for being here on this podcast. I am so happy to have you on the show.
Thank you for inviting me, Terry. I'm looking forward to the conversation and exploration. Yeah, a delight to be here.
Thank you. And it's really interesting because my first love in the work that I do is through neuro-linguistic programming, which means that I've become a little bit, I won't say a connoisseur, quite, how do you say, fastidious with my words. And yet I'm really mindful of what I say with you because there is an essence. And for those of you who are about to get into listening to this, if you love Eckhart Tolle, if you are looking for your own inner bliss, if you've been swarmed by beliefs that have kept you stuck, you are not going to want to miss this because we've also got something really exciting lined up towards the end. So get yourself your favorite drink and sit down, relax, and take it all in. So let's ask the first question before we go into your story, your beginnings of being in the Roman Catholic Church, which I feel is probably quite significant to your story. Where did you discover, who am I really? When was that question brought about for you?
It came about really in my meditative journey. The deeper I went into meditation as the years went by, and things started to open up for me, that inquiry really started to emerge as a deep question. And knowing that I wasn't at that time sure where it was coming from, that there was more here to life than at that point that I'd realized. And I read a few things, not a lot. I watched a few videos, again, not a lot, but there was a recognition that there was something much deeper to be realized. And that was, so I began meditation in the year 2000. By 2009, I'd left my old world behind as a chartered civil engineer and director of a large business to follow what was a very strong spiritual calling, enough to be able to leave that career behind right at the top of the profession.
That is amazing. So you just packed up and left behind all that engineering wisdom and everything you had because you discovered the essence of
I would say I discovered it at that point. There was a knowing that it was calling me, and that calling couldn't be ignored any longer. I'd felt it about 5 years earlier. And that by the 2009 came, I thought, I just cannot leave this any longer. I've got to follow where this is taking me.
Mike, can I get that? Because there could be people out there that are not self-actualized at this moment of time, that are searching or understanding that there is an essence that's far greater than surely what's happening in their world now. What did it feel like? Can you describe that calling?
It was a knowing, an inner knowing, I would say. It was so strong that there was just clear that there was something much more profound, much deeper that was calling me. That yes, all these worldly achievements were great. I'd gone from being a working class background to being the top of top of the industry in the profession I was working in, and all that was great, and that could have continued. But this calling, this knowing, was so strong that it felt like all of that was insignificant in comparison to it. It just,
Wow.
yeah, like that.
Just paled into insignificance. A lot of people, when they come into the show, find, I suppose it depends on who you are. And I feel like we all have a calling, an innate calling. And I believe that when we ignore that, we do suffer as a result. I know for sure that I suffered, and I also am very stubborn. So being a very stubborn human being, it took me to get to a point, and you hear about it all the time, where people come to the end of the tether. Just to give an idea of what I'm talking about here, I remember doing a podcast with a wonderful man only a few months ago, and he described a moment where he changed his whole world and his whole life, and he was holding on to a bridge, and he was saying, "Who am I?" And then he went on to that road of discovery. Did you find that you were having those kind of moments before you realized you came into your essence of your self-actualization?
Yeah, that happened in phases, really. The calling happened whilst I was still working, and I'm knowing that I was going to eventually have to leave that world behind, and the benefits that came with that financially. But then after leaving that world behind, and also changing house, leaving a relationship behind, that was the biggest part, probably, definitely, without a doubt. And then post that, when I walked into that void, there were phases within that where there was a realization that things I'd been holding on to as identities were going to have to be let go of, and that were no longer true about me, and they all had to go. And it wasn't all necessarily a bed of roses in that, but I was crystal clear that letting go of them was fundamental to peace and this realization. Yeah.
Wow.
And so I dropped them.
When you say you drop them, I love this, because I know that there'd be a lot of people out there that are suffering in so many ways, and had all these bad habits, and we know that all those parts of us and our habits and all those elements of our life really come back to our beliefs and what we're saying to ourselves and what we're telling ourselves. So what does a person do to drop a lot of that stuff? Is it a decision? Is it just a decision? Is it an intention, or is there a technique?
Sure. I would say in my own experience, there were a number of phases to that. So one that I'd still share today is very important. What was pretty clear to me very early on, as things started to open up, was that actually, although this calling was there, I actually realized from within very early on that I actually didn't really know anything about this subject of self-realization, non-duality, or enlightenment. I knew nothing about it. And there was a knowing that actually embracing that was fundamental. So I might have had, up until that point, some beliefs about certain things, but it was pretty clear to me, actually, I really knew nothing about this subject. And I was totally willing to be open to a new way of seeing things. Now, that was what drove the process underneath it, but there were phases within that came along with things like learning meditation. I explored a number of complementary therapies, which were hugely beneficial to me, helped open me up. But I also was made clear that I had to drop those. even though I was very good at them, and it had a beneficial effect on others. So they opened me up, helped me release a lot of emotional baggage. But driving it all was this willingness to embrace that I actually know nothing. And ultimately, the dawning realization came that Philip wasn't in charge of this process. It wasn't Philip that was in charge. It was life itself, the infinite awareness, the infinite silence, as I call it, or the infinite consciousness that was driving the process. And so the willingness to let go of Philip's idea of how this should manifest, that was also involved. And ultimately, it's not so much, it's not a technique, it's not a tool, it's not a strategy, it's opening to this awareness that this is what's going to ultimately bring the peace that you're looking for. And that's what eventually was realized, if you like.
That is amazing. And I'm reflecting here on a couple of very vital things that you have said in this conversation so far. And this self-actualization, this essence of where you are and, I don't know, a human being rather than a human doing.
Yes.
Led you from the place and the space where you gave up two very powerful and critical things that I've only heard about these two, but they seem to be pretty important things. And that is an engineering lucrative position. And also you mentioned your marriage as well.
It wasn't a marriage. I wasn't a marriage. I was a long-term relationship. I wasn't actually married.
Your relationship.
Yeah.
My apologies for that. But it obviously was significant.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And it was obviously a partnership that you felt such a strong conviction within yourself. And obviously this is adult life we're talking here. So where did the Roman Catholic Church start, and when you began to ask yourself questions such as, if this is about one faith and the essence of what they were teaching, then what about everybody else? Can you go through that and express what was going on for you where you had that enlightened moment?
Yeah, so I was brought up a Catholic, and so basically I went to a Catholic school, and one of the things that we were taught was that this was the one true faith. That was back in the 60s in Manchester in England. And it didn't really make any sense to me because I had friends that weren't Catholics. I knew there were lots of people in the world that weren't Catholics. And I thought it didn't make sense that this idea that this one religion could be the one true faith. That just didn't make any sense even to a young boy. And also what accentuated it quite a lot, I would say, is we had Irish Catholic families either side of us and further down the row of our terraced houses. And that was the time the Troubles, the euphemistically entitled Troubles in Northern Ireland, was really starting to get to their height. And this puzzled me because it was kind of like that was Catholic versus Protestant. And so there were Protestant people on our road. And I remember thinking, why are these people fighting and killing each other? What is the problem here? And I remember this thought, I called it a thought experiment at the time, but it's an awareness experiment. But it went like this. If two people were born in a hospital on the same day, same time, same sex, everything, one was born to a Catholic family and one was born to a Protestant family, and they accidentally and horrifically got swapped. So the one that was supposed to be brought up Catholic was brought up Protestant and vice versa. Was it possible that in being brought up by a different family, horrific as the case might be would be for the families, that they would be conditioned into believing what their environment led them to believe? If we're against Catholics, we're against Protestants or whatever. And it seemed to me that this was around 10 or 11, that it was entirely possible that's what could happen.
Oh, yeah.
And by being brought up in that environment, and it wasn't definitely going to happen, but it was probable that it could happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that led me to reach the view that isn't this what's been happening for years, not just in Northern Ireland, but with the world in general, that people have been conditioned into certain ways of being and beliefs. And I don't remember sharing that much with anybody, but I remember thinking that there's something here. And I remember many years later, just to complete the story, I saw an example of this come to life. And I'll just share this because I think it's important for people and your listeners. Basically, there was a family, a lady from Germany and a guy from Trinidad and Tobago, I think he was, of Jewish extraction. They married, had twin boys. It's Oscar and Store and Jack Youth. You can look them up. And basically, the parents separated within 6 months of them being born. And this was just as World War II was beginning to break out. Oscar was brought up in Nazi Germany, and Jack was brought up in Trinidad and Tobago. So he had a Jewish influence, and Oscar had a Nazi Germany and Catholic influence. And basically, they didn't meet again until after the war. And basically, what Oscar said was that we believed everything the Nazis told us and disregarded the rest. And the sad part of that story was they could never completely meet with their beliefs later in life. They met on a number of occasions, and they couldn't talk about things like religion, who was responsible for the war, and so forth. They had what one of their wives called a love-hate relationship. And so this was identical twins. And it was, for me, it was a reinforcement of the thought experiment that I'd had as a child. It was like, wow, here it is in a really big way.
Oh, so what I'm really hearing here is what's cracked you open here. It really comes down to the belief system, and environmentally that is quite huge. So if for another example, if a child grows up and they had the sliding doors, I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, but on one case scenario, they were brought up with loving parents and they were encouraged and they were led to believe that they were royalty, let's just say, for example. And they were treated like royalty. They were told they were royalty. They believed they were royalty, and they began acting like they were royalty. And then on the other side of the coin, there was the sliding door, the other pathway, where they were brought up by very unfortunate circumstances where there was no money, there was no love, there was no guidance, and they were put down and they were influenced to obviously be thieves and stealing just to make their life. It's interesting that their whole identity would be completely different just from what they were led to believe. So can you talk us through, Philip, because I know this is really your area of the conditioning, identity, and the human experience?
Yeah, so basically what I eventually, as the realization dawned in two phases, in 2011 and then fully in 2014, what it became crystal clear at that stage was that essentially what we've been conditioned into is what I call a case of mistaken identity. And that's essentially the belief that all you are is this body-mind. I have this body-mind experience. It's called Philip. Terry there in Australia has that as well. But the realization was that, yes, there is this experience and it's very important, but it's like a car. You might have a car, but you're not your car. And what became crystal clear was that yeah, this is how life experiences itself through this body mind. But there's something much deeper, much more profound, that is the energy of the universe behind it all. And that's what we are. And so it's the belief that all you are is the body mind is actually the one and only block to this realization. Every other belief, every other block that people experience is just, it's a mathematical term, it's a subset, it's a function of that one mistaken belief.
Well, so we are not our culture, we are not our religion, we are not our sexuality, we are not our misgivings and failures. We are the essence of what?
So we basically, the term that came to me in the realization is what we are is infinite silence. That might not mean very much to people, so I'll express it a few other ways. Infinite awareness that's not personal, or infinite consciousness or source. We are one with that, and yet we're expressed in infinite variety. So there's Philip here in England, there's Terry there in Australia. And it doesn't mean that we're not diminishing that experience of being Terry or being Philip or being somebody in the USA or whatever. No, actually, life wants to experience itself through your form. But its deep invitation is to say, actually, although you have this experience of being Terry, what you're really here is to realize that which you truly are. And that is life's greatest gift unto itself. And that's the message that I share with the world.
Wow. How liberating that is right there. Guys, as we continue on in the show, you're going to get to experience the essence of what Philip is really speaking about. You will be able to find his details in the show notes so you can make contact. One of the things I was going to say is that there are so many people in the world, I reckon the world's gone crazy actually, that are trauma, and they're locked into these behaviors and all of these elements. And so what you're speaking about is actually very liberating. So how do you, I shouldn't say how is not a great question, but what do you do to bring that person who's perhaps stuck in a trauma bond and they're all about the experience of what they've remembered, what their body has remembered, and as a result, what they believe, and this is causing shocking behaviors. Can you talk us through what, a person can expect when they come into your presence around this?
Sure. I think the first thing to say there is that everybody is called to this no matter what, no matter who you are. However, there's a kind of ripeness that needs to be there for you to open to this. And different people are at different points on this journey, from being deeply lost in trauma and suffering. And there's profound compassion for when somebody's in that situation, through to things are starting to change and open up for me. So typically people will find what I share when they get to a point in life where they're going, there must be more to life than this. And at that point, that's the point where I can help them and guide them and say, look, there's something much deeper here. And the key to that is what I call recognizing the unchanging awareness or the infinite silence. And I can give them simple exercises and meditations to help them to start to see the truth of that. Because it's not about believing what Philip says, not at all, not in the slightest, nothing to do with that. It's about making this experientially realizable for them. That first step is recognizing awareness. The other side of the coin to that, I sometimes put this on what's called a yin-yang diagram. You've probably heard those words. So that's like the kind of one part of the diagram is recognizing that. The other part is a question, exploring the question, who am I? And I asked other questions as part of that. Who am I without belief or before belief? Or who am I without knowledge? Or who am I without memory? These questions are very powerful, and I tend to ask them in a meditative space. And when people first do them, they tend to identify with the body still, but as they open more and go deeper into it with practice, they start to get words like space, silence, stillness, awareness, presence. And these are indicators to them, direct indicators to them that there's much more here. The other thing that can happen, and I've seen this a lot, it does happen whether it's online or in person, when somebody's really ripe and really ready, they can have massive spontaneous releases of trauma. And that's happened on many occasions. And it can be quite scary to the untrained eye. But what it is a natural opening taking place of this held in, locked in energy being released from the body. So yeah, it can be quite profound.
Through those questions that are so powerful, what Philip is really describing is his essence of the art of stillness and asking those questions. So when I'm thinking about what if I forgot that, if a person's got a fear about, say, public speaking, what if you forgot that you ever had that fear?
Yeah.
Then how would you be instead? So I do love the fact that you've proposed those questions to us, and the aspect of finding that quietness and that presence and that awareness, that seems effortless. But I can feel my whole physiology has changed since having this conversation with you. So it's powerful, and this is a blessing for people that are listening into the show. Through meditation, you obviously began to realize something quite extraordinary, and really it was where you've self-actualized everything that's happened. It was observing the body and observing thoughts in the mind and just being with them. And I guess we're going to have that little experience very soon. So in the next few minutes, so stand by, everyone. So what do you believe about the paths that we pick up through life, like the parts of anxiety and the parts of even depression or the parts of those bad habits? Do you feel that those can be completely dropped and released through this kind of essence of what you're teaching?
The short answer to that is yes, they can. Without unequivocally, yes, that's entirely possible. And that's why you're here. Depending upon where you are in that journey, it may be that you will need some other support beyond meditation. There are many great complementary therapies that could bring you to a more stable position, such that you are ready to open to awareness. So if you're receiving support, medical guidance and so forth for that, then that's important for you to continue with that. But generally speaking, once you're in a more stable position, ultimately it's only going to be through the power of awareness, stillness, silence, that the ultimate transformation will take place. The others, not bad or wrong, in fact, they're very effective from direct experience, if there's ones that are resonant for you, but they're like what I call spiritual stepping stones. So you might use a particular technique or tool. For instance, one I looked at was something called emotional freedom techniques. Very effective, very powerful. But what was also made clear to me, there came a point where I needed to leave that behind. Now, what I'm sharing here isn't a belief that I have about this. It's a knowing. This awareness,
it's a knowing,
becomes a crystal clear that it's infinite and it's infinitely powerful, and it is which we are. And I interchange the words silence and awareness. And sometimes I'll say silence is the universal solvent. It can dissolve everything that you are not. But that will come when you're open and ready for that. Yeah.
My goodness, this is just gold. This is absolute gold. I just want to really, before we begin the practice that you're going to take us through, I want you to talk me through, we talked about the mistaken identification, but you said something else to me backstage, which alluded to this identification. Would you express that? And obviously identity plays quite a huge role
Yes.
in our lives. So can you talk us through that?
Yeah. So the belief that all you are is the body mind will manifest in many different identities that will vary by place, birth, where you are, the conditions that you are brought up in, and so forth. And from the universe's perspective, none of those are wrong. They're not bad or wrong, but what they will lead to is suffering. And you don't need to believe me on that. That's what they will lead to, because they're a limitation upon that which you truly are. So self-realization, self-actualization, enlightenment, whatever you want to call it, non-duality, is the willingness to be open to actually you're so much more than that. And as that willingness opens you up from the inside, what will happen is those beliefs that you've had will dissolve. And that may be in profound energetic experiences. Quite often that will be the case. And that can involve massive emotional release. This might sound scary, but it's not. It's being driven by awareness. It might involve shaking of the body. There are many processes that can happen here that essentially it's a bit like being jet washed, I sometimes call it, from the inside. All the grime that you're carrying and emotionally, energetically will be released and dissolved. And the more willing you are to face that, feel that, and trust the silence, the easier that journey is, essentially. It will dissolve it all. It will dissolve it all.
I feel like I'm experiencing a mini retreat right here. This is just so much of that essence, and we're going to hand over to allowing you to anchor us into the now in any way you feel that, I guess, you are led intuitively, and the person that's praying for you may be out there in a timeless space. Who knows whether it's in 5 days, 5 hours, or 5 years. But I'd love for you to just really embrace whatever that essence is that you would like to anchor in with us, whether through breath, sensation, sound, stillness, all of the above. Can I hand over to you for that now?
Sure. So what I'd like to do is a little exercise with you. It's a very simple little exercise, this. And at one point, I'm going to be ringing a singing bowl with this striker I've got here. But it's essentially, it's a meditation. It can be short and sweet. But what it is about, recognizing, being open to recognizing this awareness that I'm talking about. And this awareness is not personal. It's not personal. This is very important. So the way to do this is just, if you can do this, Terry, now if you want. Any the listeners can do this, even if they're not listening to it live. Just simply close your eyes now. Just simply close your eyes. And as you do that, just be open and accepting totally whatever's here now. So there may be emotions, feelings, sensations, thoughts. Just let all of those be there without any judgment, totally accepting the fact that they're just simply here now. And it's a bit like you're watching a movie from the inside. All these phenomena are just happening, and you're the watcher, the neutral watcher of them. No judgment. They're just here, and there's a presence watching. Now, let me give you an example of this. In a moment, I'm going to tap the singing bowl. You'll hear a loud, metallic, shrill sound. Just watch that and just notice what happens. Just be aware of it. And what happened, there was a brief silent pause. I tapped the singing bowl gently. It reached a crescendo of sound, and then, without any further input, it faded to silence. And this presence I'm talking about, this awareness, noticed that. And it just happened. The sound reached a peak and faded to silence. Now let's say that was an emotion in your body. The sound of the singing bowl was an emotion. An emotion is here. It's just watched, and an emotion is energy in motion. It's a vibration. That's all it is. And we're just going to allow ourselves to watch that emotion, feel that emotion, without any judgment about what it is, what type of emotion it might be. It's just being watched. And what will happen naturally and effortlessly, without any effort on your part, just like the singing bowl, if you just watched silently, effortlessly, without any judgment, over time, it may be very quickly, or it may be a few minutes, or it could be longer period than that, it would just fade to silence, because emotion is vibration and it will always return to silence. And the awareness just notice that process taking place, just like the singing bowl reaching a crescendo and fading. Awareness, silence, is just observing this neutrally, effortlessly. And the same is true of all phenomena, by the way. And if we begin to open to this awareness is just here watching, silently, neutrally, non-judgmentally, we can then go to the next step. and ask the question inside, is that awareness affected in any way by the emotion, the feeling, the sensation, the sound of the singing bowl? And even if you can't see that right now, eventually you will realize that no, it's not affected. It just watches. It's just aware. Simply, silently, effortlessly aware. And this, my friends, is the essence of meditation. Self.
Whoa, that was absolutely sensational. And I believe that we can all now be aware that we feel differently to when we first began listening to this. And that's exactly what this is all about. And I am so incredibly grateful from the bottom of my heart that you have given me this experience and the many thousands of people that it's going to reach. And yes, and I just thank you, Philip. And I do say, as I love to always ask this question at the end of every show, is there anything that you would want to either reiterate or speak on before we close? Is there anything that you feel that needs to be said?
I would say that just be open to this. Follow your heart is calling you home right now, right here, right now, and in this moment. And if this has spoken to you in any way, shape, or form, or you can just sense there's something here that I haven't quite grasped yet, listen to what your heart has to say about it. Not your mind, not your head, but your heart. Because the heart will lead you home. Because the heart never lies. Never lies.
Wow.
Yeah, the head will make you doubt it, question it, but the heart will feel uplifting, inspired, expansive, often surprising. This energy from the heart you control. The doubter of the mind, you cannot. It has nothing useful to say about this, but the heart will guide you home. Yeah, that's what I would say. Follow your heart.
That is so amazing. Philip Wade, thank you so very much for your time and the essence of what you've just brought and the gift.
Our show where we have explored through this various topic along with all the exciting new topics that we bring every week to enhance your personal mastery of excellence. Now, I'd love you to do me a favor. In fact, be part of the Legacy 1 million that I have in the vision for 2028. If you know someone who really would benefit from this recording, from this episode, please share it with them. And when you subscribe, you get notified every week of our episode as soon as it drops. So let's do that legacy thing. Let's share, let's care, let's enrich. And I look forward to bringing you another week of the most enriching content. So until next time, stay inspired, stay awesome, and keep on mastering your excellence.